This is a photo that I deleted, and then I thought, you know, I wonder if I can turn this into something using path blur. I do like the bicycles. I like the bikes at the end of the earth, you know, just kind of facing out to the ocean. I think there's a story there. First thing I'm thinking is that I don't want these people here, and I might only want one bicycle. I might only want this bike and then get rid of all of these. So that's stuff that we're gonna do in Photoshop in just a second. The first thing, I don't know, I might push auto. Okay, that's gonna brighten it up a little bit. I think if we're gonna do some sort of a motion blur or path blur on this, we need to saturate the colors in the sky and maybe add some contrast to the water so that the white really pops, and probably the same on this beach area so that we get some nice contrast here in the foreground. First thing, I'm gonna come down and I'm gonna enable lens corrections. That's just gonna flatten out that image a little bit and get rid of any distortion from the lens. And then I'm gonna go into crop and I'm gonna straighten out that horizon, because what is the biggest sign of an amateur photograph? An uneven horizon. That's right. Okay. So now we have a straight horizon, we have a lens corrected image, we've applied auto settings. I'm gonna add some saturation to the whole thing just to bring out some of those colors. Then I'm gonna go into masking. We can do an entire video on different masking techniques. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments and we're gonna make that happen. In the meantime, let's select the sky. Should be an easy selection because it's just straight, but so this is interesting. You see that there isn't a lot of contrast between the sky color and the ocean color. So it's a little bit difficult for Lightroom to make that determination. You know, obviously we have that straight horizon line, but it may not be perfect. So if we turn on overlay, you're gonna see that there's some overflow of that mask into the water. A couple ways to remedy that. This little trick that I like to do when we're in our mask, we go into subtract, we subtract the sky. I know it seems super weird, but when we do that, you can see what it leaves over is that part that we don't really want there. And so then when we subtract the sky, then we have our subtracted sky here. Let's go down to our three dots and then invert that sky selection. And sometimes that's enough. Yeah, that is enough this time because it deselects that part past the horizon that we wouldn't want selected anyway. So that's cool. So now that we have our sky selected, we're gonna come down to our light section here. Let's turn off the overlay so we can see. And let's bring the highlights down. Let's increase the contrast. Remember, we're gonna add a blur effect here. So as it looks now, we're gonna make it look not very appealing, but when we add that blur, it's gonna look a lot cooler. I'm gonna add saturation so we get some difference between the sky and the water. You know, push it a little further than we would if we were just gonna use this as a regular photograph. Temperature, I'm gonna leave it because there's not a lot of warmth in the sky anyway, and I think if we add warmth, it's gonna look pretty fake. Obviously that looks awful, and looks awful decreasing too. So yeah, we're gonna leave that temperature right there at 0, not change that one bit, or decrease the blacks a little bit just to give it that contrast when we add that blur. Something like that is probably gonna be good enough for the sky. Now to do the same, there's a couple things that we can do here. We can do a duplicate and invert mask, and that'll just select everything that is not the sky, so everything from the horizon down. We might start there and add white. This is all gonna be blurred out anyway. The only thing that we're gonna have in focus is this bicycle, and the rest is gonna be in motion blur. That's my vision anyway, so let's see if that turns into anything cool. I think we're in pretty good shape here. I'm gonna pull the blacks down again a little bit more. That's a good way to add some, instead of using this contrast slider, a little bit more of a precise way to do it is to go in and increase whites and decrease blacks, or opposite, depending on the photo that you're using. I like to increase the whites manually and decrease the blacks manually to the point that I like. And for this purpose, probably gonna stick with something right about there. That might be all that we're gonna do in Lightroom for the moment. So we've made some initial adjustments in Lightroom, and now let's open this baby up in Photoshop and do this. We're gonna remove the people, we're gonna remove this little group of bicycles here. We'll clean up these people in the background, and add a blur. So right click on the photo, edit in Photoshop. And now we have our photo open in Photoshop. I'm going to unlock this layer just by clicking that padlock here. Okay, so now we have an unlocked photo open in Photoshop. I want to remove the people, I want to remove these bicycles, and just leave this bicycle. So there's a couple of ways that we can explore doing this, and we'll just see which one works the best. I'm gonna grab my magnifying glass, I'm gonna zoom in on the people a little bit, and I'm gonna grab our remove tool. This is the AI tool in Photoshop. If this works, this is the easiest and fastest way to do it, so I like to try that one first and see how that goes. Our size needs to be increased because our little selector is little there, so I'm gonna use our close bracket button on the keyboard and increase that size. And you can see up in the corner here, you can see the size increase. There's 175, 200, 250. So I'm gonna leave it at 250. And then I'm just going to paint over this group of people and see if Photoshop is able to identify that group of people and remove them. So cool. Isn't that the coolest thing in the world? Man, it just it makes things so much easier than going in and cloning and selecting and removing. And that is probably the biggest advancement in Photoshop that I've seen in years, maybe ever. It's just the coolest tool. Play around with that remove tool. It just gets better and better. That's amazing. Okay, so let's do the same thing with this group of bicycles and see if it can give us a similar result. So we're just gonna paint over the area with the bicycles, make sure we get the whole thing, and let's see what happens. Gotta be kidding me. Seriously, magic. Absolutely magic. Play with that tool. It's just amazing. Okay, so now we're gonna go back into our magnifying glass. I'm gonna hold Option down, so that turns into a negative, and I'm gonna zoom back out again. Now, we have just that bicycle sitting there in front of this ocean. So already I think this is a better composition than it was before. It's oversaturated, but we're not gonna leave this photo as is. We are gonna apply a blur, and that's where the saturation is gonna actually look good. So, okay, so the next things I wanna do, I'm gonna wanna select this bicycle and remove it temporarily for the blur, and I wanna remove these surfers and stuff in the background because I don't want, they're gonna turn into black streaks, and I don't necessarily want those. So again, I'm just gonna grab my remove tool, and this time I can make it a little bit smaller, and then I'm just gonna go click over each one of those black dots. And then if there's other areas we wanna clean up, like maybe this one, you can just do the same thing, paint over that, and that'll go away. And the rest, I think, I'm gonna leave. Okay, so now I wanna select this bicycle and temporarily remove it. So how do we do that? We're gonna go into our object selection tool, which is here. Now it's on, you see it's on quick selection tool. I'm just gonna click this tiny little down arrow here and select object selection instead. And you know what, actually I'm gonna zoom in on this bicycle first to make sure we get it all. If we zoom in on the bike and then go to object selection tool and then click on the bicycle, and it looks like it did a nice job. Yeah, we might have an issue with these spokes because it's not selecting the spokes as part of the bicycle. So we're gonna see how that looks. We might put it in there and it may not be a big deal because we may not see much of them anyway. For now, let's take it as it is. So we have this bicycle selected with our object selection tool, and then I'm gonna hit Command C to copy that bicycle, and then I'm gonna hit Command V to paste that bicycle. And so now we have a new layer here that is just that bicycle. So if we take layer 0 out, we see what was selected. And so you see that it missed kind of the bottom of that tire and it missed the spokes. Overall, it's not too bad. So if we put that layer back in there, oh, that's why it didn't select the tire, because it has rocks over it. So that's gonna be, okay, that's good. That's gonna be interesting for us to take a look at after we add this motion blur. Okay, so let's make sure layer 0 is selected. Now I wanna remove this bicycle. We're gonna do that with our remove tool. Same thing that we did earlier. We're gonna paint over the bicycle. And there's a couple ways to do this. Like if this doesn't work, I'll show you a different way. There's a lesson. Make sure layer 1 is turned off because you might remove the bicycle from layer 0 and it won't go away. And you're like, why won't it go away? Well, it's because layer 1 is still activated and you're looking at layer 1, you're not looking at the background. So turn that off and it'll go away. And we still have a couple of leftovers there, so we're just gonna get rid of those. If the remove tool doesn't work, you can go down here to the patch tool, and that'll allow you to draw a circle around the area that you want to remove and then replace it with an area next to it. That works really well too. And then if that doesn't work, you can use your clone tool where you just select an area you want to clone, cover up the bicycle, and done deal. Use the remove tool first because that's the easiest, most effective way to do it. All right, friends, so now that we are at this point, we're gonna go into the filter section in Photoshop, and we're gonna go down to Blur Gallery, and we're gonna select Path Blur. And this little arrow here is the direction that path blur is going to go. If we wanted to add a blur that's kind of in line with the direction of the shoreline and the waves, then we can do that. So we might try that and see how it works. Speed is where we control how much blur is applied. Now it's at 50%, which is obviously very little. We can go all the way up to 500% or 474%, and you see that it's a much more abstract and artistic type of look. And for this example, I think I want to do that. I want to stay somewhere. I want to keep it really abstract. So I kind of like that. I like the direction of the blur following the waves and the shoreline. I like the color in the water and the shapes that it created, and I like that the sky is contrasted from the water. So I approve. I'm gonna click OK, and then Photoshop is gonna make that change. So now we have the photo with the motion blur applied. Looks pretty cool, I think. I'm liking it. And all we need to do now is add that bicycle back in, and that bicycle is in layer 1 here. So if we just turn that layer back on, the bicycle's gonna pop back in. I think that looks pretty cool, and that's the look that I was hoping to get. And when we're all done in Photoshop, we just close out of the photograph, hit save. We're gonna do no image compression, save in Macintosh, hit OK, and it'll open up back in Lightroom. So when we're back open in Lightroom again, we have our final image. We started here, this was our start, and then we ended here. I hope that you learned something. I hope you've had some fun, and I hope you'll check out one of these videos next, and I will see you there.